Story 1. The Hotel Night Audit. I was working the night shift at a small hotel, and this story happened about a year ago, but I still think about it all the time because it genuinely scared me to my core. I still don't know what that guy was planning or what he was trying to do. I get a genuinely uneasy feeling when I recall how long he was there, and that I didn't even realize right away that he shouldn't have been there. The hotel was small, only 3 floors and maybe 40 rooms. It wasn't a very busy location. Usually on weeknights we'd only have about 10 to 15 rooms occupied. My shift was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Typically it was very boring and quiet, which I was perfectly fine with. I just sat behind the desk, handled paperwork, occasionally looked at the cameras, and sometimes watched YouTube on my phone if there was absolutely no work. The lobby was small, just the front desk, sofas on the side with a TV, and a vending machine in the corner. Behind the desk was a small office where the computer and chair were, and through a glass window I could see the lobby while sitting inside. The front doors automatically locked at night, so guests had to ring a bell, and I'd press a button to let them in. Usually nothing happened after midnight, besides the rare late guest. But one night, around 11 p.m., this man came in, and the memory of it still gives me a sickening feeling in my stomach. He rang, and I let him in. He looked to be in his 40s, tall, lean, but not overly so, dressed in jeans and a baseball cap, with a backpack. He approached the desk and asked if we had a room for the night. I said yes, gave him the price, he nodded and took out a card. I swiped it, the payment went through, and I gave him the key card for room 214 on the second floor. I remember him looking at me for a little too long before he left. He had this detached expression, and his eyes stayed on me for 3 or 4 seconds after I handed him the key. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. There was nothing overtly threatening about his behavior, but it was enough that I remembered him. After that, I sat back down in my chair and played on my phone for a while. Around midnight, I looked up and saw that he was in the lobby again. He didn't approach the desk. He just walked past me and sat down in the seating area with the sofas. The TV was off, but he was just sitting there, staring at it. I figured maybe he couldn't sleep. Some guests sometimes sit in the lobby. So I didn't think much of it. But after half an hour, I realized he was literally just sitting there, doing nothing. He wasn't looking at his phone or reading. He wasn't even dozing off. He was just staring straight ahead at the blank screen. At one point, I got up to get a bottle of water from the vending machine. As I walked across the lobby, I felt him turn his head and follow me all the way. I didn't look directly at him, but I felt his eyes on me until I was back behind the desk. It gave me a very anxious feeling. Around 1 a.m., out of boredom, I was checking the reservation system on the computer. That's when I noticed something strange. I pulled up the list of occupied rooms and saw that room 214 was listed as vacant. I mumbled something to myself and double-checked because I had personally checked this guy in just an hour ago. I thought I might have made a mistake. I looked at the registration logs, but he wasn't there. No name, no payment, nothing. Then I went to the transaction section to confirm his card had gone through earlier, but there were 0 payments. I remember being absolutely confused because I could swear I swiped his card and it made a noise like it worked, but there was absolutely nothing in the system. Then I picked up the phone and called room 214. The call rang about 10 times, but no one answered. I then checked the keycard entry log, which shows if the door to that room was open tonight, and it showed 0 entries. No one had entered the room. That's when I realized he hadn't even gone up to the room after I gave him the card. I looked over at the seating area, and he was still sitting there, staring at the turned-off TV. A terrible feeling started building in my chest. I sat there, deciding what to do. Part of me thought maybe the system just glitched, but the fact that there was no room entry record and no payment made it clear that he wasn't even registered. I waited another 15 minutes just watching him. Around 1:30, I walked over and asked if everything was all right. He turned his head, looked at me with no expression, and said he just couldn't sleep. Then he turned back to the TV. I nodded and went back behind the desk, but my hands were shaking. Around 2 o'clock, I noticed he wasn't sitting in the lounge area anymore. My heart instantly sank because I hadn't seen him leave the lobby at all. I scanned the area, and then I noticed him standing at the end of the hallway near the restrooms, half hidden in the darkness. He was just standing still. I kept glancing at him, pretending to work on the computer. He stood there for a while, and then slowly came back and sat down in the lounge area again, as if nothing happened. I called my manager at home and explained what was happening. She sounded tired and told me to just keep an eye on him and call the police if he did anything threatening. I remember hanging up and thinking it already felt threatening, but I didn't know what else to do. After that, I checked the security cameras. I saw him on the camera in the first-floor hallway. He walked the entire hallway, stopped at the end, stood there for several minutes, and then walked back. Later, he went into the stairwell and stayed there for about 10 minutes. I don't know what he was doing there. Every time I looked up from the computer, he was somewhere else, near the vending machines, by the elevators. One time he was just standing near the corner of the lobby where the light was dim. He was always watching. By 3:30, I couldn't take it anymore, so I called the non-emergency police line and explained that there was a person in the hotel who I didn't think was a guest. They said they would send someone. While I waited, I noticed he had moved again, this time closer to the desk. He was standing maybe 5 meters away, just observing me. He barely blinked and certainly wasn't talking. He was just staring, as if he had a problem with his gaze. I pretended to type something on the computer, but I was so scared I could barely breathe. Around 4:10 a.m., the doorbell rang, and I thought it was the police, but it was just another late guest. I quickly let him in, and the man turned his head and watched the guest walk past. I noticed his eyes followed him across the entire lobby. That scared me even more, as it felt like he was studying him. After a few minutes, he disappeared again. I checked the cameras and saw him standing near the door of one of the guest rooms on the first floor, literally just standing there. That's when I called 911. I told him he was standing near a guest's door and I didn't know what he was trying to do. They informed me officers were already on the way. I watched the camera feed non-stop, and he just stood by the door for about 3 minutes, then slowly returned to the lobby. When he came back, this time he walked right up to the desk and leaned over the counter. He looked at me and asked if there was any food. His voice was so quiet it was unnerving. I told him the vending machines are in the corner. He smiled slightly, then backed away. I just sat there watching the clock, begging for the police to arrive. Finally, around 4:10, 2 officers arrived. I let them in and immediately pointed at him. He was back in the lounge area. They walked over and talked to him for a few minutes. They asked for his ID and asked questions I couldn't make out. Then they escorted him out. One of the officers came back and explained that the guy was not a guest at all. The credit card he gave me was stolen, and he had no bags or reservation. He was just pretending to gain access to the building. He was charged with trespassing and using a stolen card. After they left, I sat there shaking for the rest of my shift. Every time I looked at the cameras, I expected to see him again. The scariest part for me was the realization that he had been inside the hotel for hours, wandering around, standing by guests' doors and observing me from different locations. And he wasn't supposed to be there at all. I have no idea what he was planning, but I know it wasn't good. It was the scariest night of my life. Story 2. The Gas Station Stalker. Meredith's story. My name's Meredith. I'm 24, and I work the night shift at a tiny gas station off Route 11. It's the kind of place most people don't even notice unless they're out of gas or lost. I took the job because it was quiet and predictable. I liked it, or at least I used to. It all started on a Thursday night, around 1 a.m. The air outside was humid and still, and the buzzing of the overhead light had been irritating me all shift. I was just about to microwave a cinnamon roll I didn't even really want when the door chimed. A man walked in, mid-40s, maybe older. He had a green coat, Messy hair and dry lips, like he hadn't smiled in years. He didn't head for the coffee or the chips like most people. He just stood near the counter, staring at me with a strange look, like he knew me from a long time ago. "Hello," I said, forcing a polite smile. The man then said, "Do you always work this late?" I blinked and said, yeah, mostly." He smiled. Then he said, "I thought so. I've driven by a few times. Noticed it's always you." That unnerved me more than I let on. "Oh, yeah, exactly. Small town," I replied. He didn't leave. "Meredith, right?" I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I was about to ask him how he knew, but he continued, saying I had nice handwriting and pointing to the whiteboard where I'd written cinnamon coffee back in stock. "Most people dot their I's with circles. You use little dashes. It's very specific, thoughtful." I didn't answer. He didn't buy anything. He just stood there for another minute watching me, as if he was studying my reaction. Finally, he nodded. "I'm Paul," he said. "Just curious, that's all." And then he walked out into the fog. After that, he started showing up randomly. Not every night, not often enough to scream stalker, but often enough that I stopped calling it a coincidence. Sometimes he'd come inside. Sometimes he'd just sit in his car at the edge of the parking lot with his lights off. One night I tried to ignore him. He came in, bought a bottle of water, and lingered as always. "You're quieter tonight." Long shift," I muttered. He slowly looked around the store, as if taking inventory of everything. "Must be lonely. Just you here in the dark, no one for miles." "I'm fine," I replied. He leaned across the counter. "Does it ever scare you being a woman alone at night?" His voice wasn't threatening. That made it worse. It was curious, neutral, as if he was asking about the weather. I backed up and asked him if he needed anything else. He tilted his head. "You always keep the back room door locked. Smart. I notice you check it around 2 a.m. most nights." My stomach clenched. I didn't answer. "I'll let you get back to work," he said with a soft, almost apologetic smile. "Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." And then he walked out again into the fog. After that night, I started walking to my car with my keys jammed between my fingers. I kept a tire iron under the counter. I changed the curtains in my apartment, started showering with the bathroom door locked, even when no one else was home. There were nights he wouldn't come. Sometimes I could go a whole week without seeing him, but it didn't help. It actually made it worse because I never knew when he'd appear again. Like the time I came back from my 10-minute break to find a Polaroid picture on the counter. It was me filling the windshield washer fluid tank behind the station. The shot was taken that night, up close, too close. There was no note, but the dash over the I in the word windshield on the tank's label was circled in red pen. The next time he came in, I told him to leave. I said if he stayed, I would call the police. Paul just nodded. "I understand. I've been too direct." "You're stalking me," I said with a shaky voice, and hated myself for it. "I just think you're the kind of person who's used to being misunderstood. I thought maybe you'd appreciate someone who pays attention." "That's not attention, that's obsession." He didn't flinch. "Would it be easier if I smiled and brought a soda every night? Would I be more normal if I just talked about sports and pretended not to notice how your shoes are always half a size too big, or how your left eyelid twitches when you're tired?" By this point, I was dialing 911. He didn't stop me. The police arrived quickly, and he didn't resist. He just stood there with his arms down, waiting. They searched his car and found a notebook filled with dates and times. It was my schedule, notes on my gait, my clothes, my purchases. One page was just my name, written over and over in increasingly tight loops until it became a scribble. He kept saying the same thing to the police. "I just noticed things. I'm just a curious guy." A restraining order was filed that same week. I don't work nights anymore. I don't even live in the same town. The company transferred me to another station 2 hours away. But even now, when I drive home and see headlights behind me for too long, I feel it prickling on the back of my neck. And sometimes I still think about the way he said my name, as if he already knew how it would sound in his mouth, as if he'd practiced it. Story 3. The Car on the Parking Lot. Max and Meredith's story. I want to start by saying that as of this writing, this happened to me literally last night. I work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station. I'm 22, a girl, and I've been working here for just under 2 months. I work the weekends, Thursday to Saturday, while another coworker, whom I'll call Max, works the weekdays, Sunday to Wednesday. My coworker Max and his friend, whom I'll call Ben, came into the station around 2:30 a.m. to get coffee and say hello. Max and his friend had taken magic mushrooms a couple of hours before coming, so when I saw them, they were very giggly, and honestly, it was pure entertainment for me. As we talked about different things, Ben noticed a car parked in the parking lot with its lights off, but running, and someone inside. It had been there before they drove up. He said that when he asked the guy, he replied he was waiting for a DoorDash order. It wasn't normally strange for delivery drivers to wait in their car while we packaged an order. But what was strange was that I hadn't received any orders for almost 2 hours. I had spent most of the night in the back of the store doing cleaning, away from the registers and front doors, so I couldn't even see the parking lot. We brushed it off as nothing, and the two guys went outside to smoke a cigar and play with Max's dog, whom they had brought with them. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I was alone, I thought it was a bit weird considering how long they might have been there before my coworker arrived. Fast forward about an hour, and they came back for another round of coffee. That's when Max told me more about the car being parked there, in a spot I couldn't see even from the register because of the wall. He told me that the entire hour they were playing with their dog and smoking in the parking lot, the man in the car was alternating between watching them and looking like he was texting someone on his phone. When Ben noticed this, in his highly intoxicated state, he walked up to the car and asked, "What's up? Why are you staring at us?" At that point, the man tried to pretend he didn't speak English. When that didn't work, he switched to English and started saying he must have been at the wrong address before peeling out of the parking lot. He was definitely tripping harder than Max at that moment. But what made it truly creepy was that Max said the car looked brand new and had no license plates. He also noticed that there were a bunch of blankets in the back, enough to hide someone. And as the man was confronted, another car had just pulled into the parking lot with its lights off, a car that also looked brand new and had no license plates. And as soon as the first car started driving away, the newly arrived car immediately followed it. Max stayed for another 15 minutes before they left and told me to be careful and watch my surroundings. Around 6 a.m., he came back for coffee, and he was definitely sober. We talked about it more. He said the guy acted super suspicious the entire time they were there, constantly checking his phone and watching them, as well as the entrance to the parking lot and the store doors. Even he admitted he was scared, and once he came down from his high, he wanted to check if I was okay. We both decided that if they hadn't been there, the entire scenario could have gone one of several ways. I don't know if it was a pure coincidence or if those two cars were planning something with me as soon as Max and Ben left and I was alone. I might carry a knife for protection, but my gut tells me that based on what they described, if there were multiple people, it might not have helped. And if they hadn't been there, just playing like kids in the parking lot, something awful could have happened to me. I'm working again tonight, and I'll let you know if anything happens during my shift. Story 4. The Car on the Parking Lot. Update. I really wish I didn't have an update for you, but I do. The car came back again during my shift. Here's how it happened. It was about 3 a.m. and I was mopping the floors when 4 guys came in to grab the coffee and snacks. I was ringing them up when one of them asked if I knew anything about a car parked at the far end of the parking lot with its lights running but off. I looked at the man and asked which car he was talking about. He then told me there was a seemingly brand new Subaru with no license plates, with what looked like two guys arguing in the front seats. I felt my heart drop into my stomach when he said it. I told the group that a car with the same description was in the parking lot last night, but there was only one guy in it, the one I took to be the leader of the group. Told me that while they were filling up, they had noticed the car, as it was there when they pulled up, and how it just sat there while they were filling their truck. He told me that when they walked toward the door, they had to walk past the car since they were at the pump furthest from the doors. He said that as they walked by, they heard the guy not exactly yelling, but talking quite loudly and pointing toward the store doors. When the guys in the car finally noticed them, they shifted into reverse and drove away. I told them I thought it was the same car as last night, which acted suspiciously when other people were in the parking lot and panicked when confronted before driving away and being followed by another car. They were alarmed and offered to stay with me for a while to make sure they didn't come back. I asked if they were sure, and when they told me it wasn't a problem, they stayed for about 20 minutes before we all decided I was probably safe. I thanked them again and let them refill their coffees for free before they left, and I was left alone.